This video will guide you through the disassembly, inspection and reassembly of a single stage, horizontal, radial split case centrifugal pump. The pump procedures are described in a series of videos where each video includes a step-by-step guide focused on a workshop performance activity. The pump is made up from the following parts: a single stage, horizontal, radial split case centrifugal pump. During the pump overhaul procedure, you will use a selection of tools to safely perform each task. Each section of the video will begin by describing the tools and their parts, and the video sequence will further explain the correct use of the tools. At any time during the video, you can click on a toolbox icon to see the tools used for a specific task. You'll need to perform a series of lifting operations during the overhaul procedure using an approved mobile floor jib crane, web strops, eye bolts, shackles and hooks to perform the lifting and rigging tasks. Be aware that the pump is heavy and needs to be handled with care. The disassembly procedure starts with the removal of the drive coupling. You will use bearing pullers to perform the task. The pullers are made up from the bridge beam, spindle, rods and beam bolts. This is the correct position for placing the bearing pullers on the drive shaft. Place an oil drip tray underneath the bearing bracket and remove the drain plug. Allow the oil to drain into the tray and dispose of the oil safely. Loosen the Allen screw holding the inner hub onto the drive shaft. Position the bearing pullers so that the beam halves are positioned behind the inner gear hub. Tighten the beam bolts. Use a ratchet or ring spanner to continue to tighten the spindle until the inner hub gear begins to slide and is completely removed from the shaft. The outer sleeve gear is now free to slide from the shaft. Use a brass punch to tap the coupling key free of the shaft. The second part of the disassembly process is to remove the seal housing and bearing bracket from the volute casing. You will use a jib crane, hooks, shackles and web slings to safely remove these parts. This is the correct way to safely rig the pump for lifting using the correct equipment. Coordinate with a partner to position the mobile jib crane in a central position over the pump. Select the center of gravity, or COG, of the load. Rig the load with the hook and shackles and attach the web sling. Operate the hydraulic jib until the web sling is tensioned. The correct selection of tools to remove the pump from the volute casing is very important. Spanners must fit exactly over the head of the nut or bolt to avoid injury. In this section of the dismantling procedure, you will use a ring spanner, a combination spanner, a socket set and a drive ratchet. You may need to separate the seal housing from the volute casing flange by forcing a wedge between the joint. It's a very important safety issue that you use a spark-resistant wedge and hammer to perform this operation. Start by loosening each nut opposite each other on the seal housing flange. Loosen the nut in the 9 o'clock position first. Then move around the pump to loosen the nut at the 3 o'clock position. This procedure ensures the pressure on the flange is released evenly. Loosen the nut at the 12 o'clock position and then at the 6 o'clock position. Continue in this pattern until all the nuts are loosened. Once all of the nuts on the seal housing flange are off, use the correct size socket, drive ratchet and combination spanner to loosen the nuts holding the bearing bracket support frame to the pump plinth. Withdraw the bolts and place them in a tray for storage. The seal housing flange is a very tight fit onto the volute casing, and you'll need to jack away from the casing in order to remove it. 2 bolts are placed to push the seal housing away from its connection with the volute casing flange. The jacking bolts are positioned opposite each other, so an even pressure can be applied to ensure the seal flange does not jam in position. Use the correct size ring spanner to tighten the jacking bolts. Work on opposite bolts a little at a time to slowly ease the flanges apart. Continue to jack the flanges apart until the pump is completely removed from the volute casing. The pump is safely supported by the mobile jib crane and can be withdrawn to a safe position. Move the pump support jig to a safe position on the workshop floor with 360-degree access. Slowly lower the pump into position and place the bolts in the support. Use a drive ratchet, socket and combination spanner to tighten the bolts. The C-spanner fits into the shaft keyway and stops it rotating without causing damage to the surface of the shaft. Locate the hook of the C-spanner into the keyway of the shaft. Make sure you position the C-spanner on the surface of the shaft to resist the rotation when your assistant begins to slacken the impeller lock nut. Loosen the impeller lock nut in a clockwise direction, as it has a left-hand thread designed this way so it will tighten as the impeller rotates in the opposite direction. Remove the impeller lock nut and place it safely in a parts tray. Withdraw the impeller from the shaft and place it safely on a workbench. Use a brass punch to carefully dislodge the plane key from the shaft. The punch tool is made of a metal that is softer than the key, and it will not damage these parts. In order to remove the seal housing from the bearing bracket, position the mobile jib crane over the jig support. Attach the shackle and web sling to the eye bolt on the seal flange and tension the web sling on the mobile jib crane. Bolt the mechanical seal jig to the seal housing flange to hold the assembly in position while the seal housing is being removed. Use a drive ratchet, socket and combination spanner to remove the 4 bolts holding the seal housing on the bearing bracket. Pull the seal housing away from the bearing bracket and lift it clear of the support jig and position it safely on a workbench. Use the jib crane to lift the seal housing into a vertical position and remove the 4 bolts holding the seal flange to the seal housing. Gently ease the mechanical seal assembly free of the seal housing and place the assembly with the seal flange face down on the workbench.